The morning of my son's wedding, I ironed my dress carefully, pinned my hair the way he always said he loved, and drove 40 minutes to that church with one thing in my chest: hope. Not excitement. Not pride. Just hope. The quiet, desperate kind that a mother holds onto even when everything inside her is whispering, something is very wrong. I walked up those stone steps. The white flowers were everywhere. Guests in their finest. Music floating through the open doors. And then, my son stepped in front of me, blocked the entrance with his body, and looked me dead in the eyes. "You weren't invited, Mom." His voice didn't shake. Not even a little. "The family decided. You're not one of us anymore." I stood there. 40 minutes of driving. 40 years of being his mother. And he said it like he was reading a parking notice. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't fall apart on those steps in front of every single person who had turned to stare. I just looked at him, tightened my grip on my purse, and said 7 words. "Okay, but check your phone later, sweetheart." Then I turned around, walked back down those steps, got into my car, and let the door close behind me. Because what nobody in that church knew, not my son, not his new wife, not one single guest in their pressed suits and pretty dresses, was that I had spent the last 8 months building something they never saw coming. The truth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives as a text message, at exactly the right moment. Stay with me, because this story doesn't end at those church steps. It ends with justice, and I want you to hear every single part of it. My name is Catherine, and before I tell you what happened, you need to understand who I was before any of this. I was not a dramatic woman. I was not the kind of mother who called twice a day or showed up uninvited or made holidays a battlefield. I was the woman who packed school lunches and worked the overnight shift at a records office and came home at 6 a.m. to make sure my son had a hot breakfast before school. I was steady. I was quiet. I was the kind of person that the world tends to overlook, which, as it turned out, was my greatest advantage. My husband, Gerald, was the same way. Calm. Disciplined. He built things slowly. A small manufacturing business, some real estate, a few careful investments over 30 years. Nobody knew how much he had accumulated because he never talked about it. We still drove older cars. We still lived in the same house we bought when our son was 3 years old. Gerald got sick when our son, Aaron, was 32. The illness moved fast. Faster than any of us were ready for. In his last weeks, Gerald called me to his bedside and he gave me 2 things. A sealed envelope and a set of very specific instructions. He said, "Catherine, what I've left behind is significant. Aaron doesn't know yet, and I need you to hold it, all of it, until you're certain he's standing on solid ground. Not financially, emotionally. I need you to make sure that what I built doesn't go to someone who doesn't deserve it." I told him I would. I didn't fully understand what that meant at the time. I would. 3 weeks after Gerald passed, I sat across from our family attorney, a calm and methodical man named Mr. Patterson, and he opened a file that made my breath stop. Gerald had left behind more than I ever knew. 3 manufacturing facilities, 2 commercial properties, a portfolio of investments that had been quietly compounding for over a decade, and a private bank account that Gerald had never once mentioned to anyone, not even me. All of it placed under my control. Legally. Fully. Aaron would be notified, but nothing would transfer to him until I determined he was ready. Gerald had written that clause himself, and he had written it carefully. I honored it exactly the way Gerald asked. I didn't change my life. I didn't tell Aaron. I didn't move. I didn't buy anything. I went back to the same house, drove the same car, and lived the same quiet life. And I waited. Stephanie arrived approximately 4 months after Gerald died. Aaron introduced her on a Sunday dinner, which was already unusual, because Aaron hadn't come to Sunday dinner in 6 weeks. She was polished. Heels at a casual family dinner. Clothes that weren't expensive in an obvious way, but were expensive in a studied way. Her smile was perfectly warm. Her eye contact was perfectly calibrated. But here's the thing about being a quiet woman who has spent decades watching people. You notice the things that polished people forget to hide. Stephanie did not look at the family photos on the wall. She did not ask a single question about Gerald. She did not look at Aaron the way a woman looks at someone she loves. She looked at the house the way a property assessor looks at square footage. Within 20 minutes of being in my home, she had asked, very casually, very sweetly, whether the house had been in the family long, whether the property extended behind the fence, whether I'd ever thought about downsizing now that it was just me. She was not making conversation. She was making calculations. I smiled. I answered politely. I refilled her water glass. And I started paying very close attention. It happened in stages. That's the thing people don't understand. It's never one dramatic moment. It's 100 small moments, each one easy to explain away on its own. First, Aaron stopped calling as often. Twice a week became once a week. Once a week became once a month. And when he did call, the conversations were shorter, more surface level, like he was checking a box. Then Sunday dinners became sporadic. Then they stopped. Then I noticed that when I did speak with Aaron, certain phrases started appearing. Stephanie thinks. Stephanie feels like. Stephanie mentioned that. At first it was normal. You fall in love, you factor in your partner. But slowly the sentences changed shape. Stephanie thinks you call too much. Stephanie feels like you don't respect our space. Stephanie mentioned that maybe you were never as supportive as you thought you were. And I recognized what was happening because I had read about it, I had seen it in other families, but you never quite believe it will happen to yours. My son was being slowly redirected. Away from me. The engagement announcement came on social media. I found out the same way strangers did. A photo, a ring, a caption that said, the most important people were there. I had not been told. I had not been called. I was not one of the most important people. I sat with that for a long time. Then they came to my house. Together. With a folder. Stephanie sat across from me at my own kitchen table and explained, very warmly, very reasonably, that they were starting their lives together and thinking about the future, and that the house, given its size and the fact that I was alone now, might be better suited as a family home for them. They had drafted documents, she said, for me to sign. They would make sure I was taken care of. Aaron sat beside her and said nothing. He watched me the way a person watches a transaction being completed. I looked at my son who used to fall asleep on this kitchen floor with his toy trucks, and I asked him one question. Is this what you want, Aaron? Is this coming from you? He glanced at Stephanie. He didn't answer. That was my answer. I told them I needed time to think. I kept my voice even. I offered them tea. I walked them to the door. And when that door closed, I picked up my phone and called Mr. Patterson. What I did next, I did carefully and legally and with full documentation. Mr. Patterson connected me with a financial investigator, a woman named Patricia, who was methodical and thorough and spoke in the same calm tone regardless of what she was uncovering. I also began doing my own quiet research. Over the following weeks, a picture came into focus. Stephanie had a pattern. She had been in a previous long-term relationship with an older man of considerable means. That relationship had ended abruptly. There had been a legal dispute over property. The case had been settled, quietly sealed, and Stephanie had walked away with a financial agreement and a new city. There was more. Financial records, accessed legally through proper channels, showed that in the months since Stephanie and Aaron became serious, Aaron had taken out a personal loan. A significant one. The funds had moved into a joint account that had been opened. I confirmed the date, before they were officially engaged. The account Stephanie had primary control over. There was also a conversation, recorded, with Aaron's knowledge and consent, during a call I made to him in which I told him I was recording for my own notes. In that call, Aaron made several statements about the property and the estate that were factually untrue in ways that mattered legally. By the time their wedding date arrived, I had a gray folder, a USB drive, and a conversation with Mr. Patterson that ended with him saying, "Catherine, you are protected." Completely. What I sent to Aaron's phone that afternoon at 3:10 p.m., just as the processional music started, was not a threat. It was a document. A single PDF, forwarded from Mr. Patterson's office. It contained 3 things. A full accounting of Gerald's estate, which Aaron had never been shown. A legal letter explaining that under the terms of Gerald's will, the estate transfer had been permanently revoked due to documented evidence of coercion, financial manipulation, and misrepresentation. And a photograph of Stephanie at a notary office 11 days earlier, signing a document under a name that was not the name she had given Aaron. Her real name was different. Her history was different. And now Aaron knew. I know what happened inside that church because Aaron called me that same evening. He said Stephanie's name 3 times before he could form a full sentence. The ceremony had paused before it began. Aaron had gone pale. He had walked to the back of the church. Stephanie had followed him. And whatever happened in that hallway, I was not there to see it, ended with Stephanie walking out of the church through a side exit, getting into a car that was not Aaron's, and not returning. The guests sat in those decorated pews for 45 minutes before Aaron came back out and quietly told them there would be no ceremony. I do not take satisfaction in chaos. I want to be clear about that. What I take satisfaction in is this. My son called me that night. He drove to my house. He sat at that same kitchen table where he had once watched Stephanie ask me to sign away my home, and he cried in a way I had not seen since he was a child. He said, "Mom, I don't even know who she was." And I put my hand over his and I said, "I know. That's why I had to find out." We stayed at that table until almost midnight. He told me everything. The pressure, the isolation, the slow and steady way she had convinced him that I was the problem. That I was controlling. That my love was transactional. That walking away from me was something he was doing for himself, not for her. And he believed it. Because that is what that kind of influence does. It doesn't feel like influence. It feels like clarity. It feels like finally seeing the truth. He had not seen the truth. I had. In the months that followed, several things unfolded. Stephanie did not simply disappear. She retained an attorney and made a claim against assets she believed she was entitled to based on promises Aaron had made. She was not entitled to them. Mr. Patterson's documentation was thorough enough that her claim was dismissed without proceeding to full litigation. The sealed record from her previous legal dispute was surfaced through proper legal channels and entered into consideration. She settled, quietly, and moved to another city. Aaron spent several months working through what had happened. He started speaking with a counselor. He called me more often. Not every day. We are not those kinds of people. But regularly. Honestly, the estate, Gerald's estate, was eventually transferred to Aaron in full, under the original terms, which Mr. Patterson confirmed were still intact and legally sound. Aaron did not use it the way Stephanie had planned. He took 6 months. He learned the business. He brought in people Gerald had trusted. He made considered decisions. He became, slowly, genuinely, the man Gerald had hoped he would be. And one afternoon, Aaron came to the house and sat across from me, and he asked me something I hadn't expected. He said, "Dad wrote you that letter. The sealed one. What did it say?" I had kept that letter for over 3 years. I had read it once, the night Gerald gave it to me, and then I had folded it and placed it in the back of my bedside drawer. I got up and retrieved it. I handed it to Aaron. He read it silently, and when he finished, his eyes were full. Gerald had written, "If you're reading this, Aaron, then your mother did exactly what I asked her to do. She protected you, even when you didn't know you needed it. Even when you maybe pushed her away. She is the best person I've ever known. Please don't forget that." Aaron didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "I won't forget again." I did not tell this story to make myself the hero. I am not sure I am. I made mistakes too. There were moments I should have spoken up sooner. Conversations I avoided because I didn't want to be the difficult one. Times I mistook keeping the peace for actually having peace. But here is what I know now after everything. The quietest people in the room are often the ones who see the most clearly, not because they are cold, but because they are not performing. They are watching. They are listening. They are building something patient and real in the spaces that louder people never think to look. Stephanie underestimated me because I did not fight loudly or visibly. She looked at my stillness and saw weakness. She saw an older woman alone in a house, easy to move aside. She saw the wrong thing entirely. If you are a mother watching someone slowly move your child away from you, I am not here to tell you what to do. Every situation is different. Every family has its own fractures. But I will tell you this. Do not spend your energy convincing people of your worth. Spend it documenting it, protecting it, building quietly while others assume you've already lost. The truth does not need to be shouted to be powerful. Sometimes it just needs to arrive as a text message, at exactly the right moment. And here is the question I want to leave with you today, the one I still sit with. How many people in your life right now are being slowly convinced that you are not who you really are, and what would it take for them to finally see the truth? Think about it. And if this story moved you, if any part of it felt familiar, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. This is Valira Payback. We'll see you in the next one.